Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is evoke, and this verb was suggested by the viewer Ressa. Ressa, thank you so much for sharing this great idea. Now, let's take a moment and review some of the definitions or the ways that we can use this verb. The first way you may encounter the verb evoke means to bring or recall to the conscious mind by either suggestion, association, or reference. Many times we'll encounter this verb as different literature or forms of art are being analyzed or discussed. And so one sentence or piece of art might make someone think about, right, recall to their conscious mind by suggesting something, referring to something else. Now, a second way you may encounter evoke can mean to elicit a response. This means to produce a response. And then a third and certainly less common way you may encounter it can mean to bring or call to mind a deity, a spirit, or supernatural power. For now, you should know that evoke is a regular verb. If you want to make the progressive form of this verb, you're going to drop the E on the end because we have a verb that ends in the pattern of vowel, consonant E. Then we're going to add an ing, and that forms evoking. The past tense and the participle form of our verb can be made by just adding D, since this verb already ends in an E. Now, our base verb, evoke, ends in an unvoiced K sound. This means the ED ending is going to make a T sound, and we're not going to add an extra syllable to the word when we say it. So the past tense and the participle form of the verb should sound like this: evoked, evoked. Now, we don't have any phrasal verbs that we need to study, so we'll move on to a little verb tense practice. Today, we're going to look at making sentences in the present perfect and the simple future. First, let's start with the present perfect. We can use this verb tense to talk about completed actions that occurred at an unknown point in the past. So we might not know if this occurred one time in the past or multiple times, and it might not matter if we know whether the action occurred yesterday or 10 years ago. A second way or reason people choose to use this verb tense is to talk about an action that started in the past and continues into the present. When we make sentences in the present perfect, we need to pay attention to our subject. Our form of the verb will change based on that subject. If your subject is I, you, we, or they, you're going to use have and then the participle form of the verb. If your subject is he, she, or it, use has and then the participle form of the verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. The actress has evoked tears, laughter, and every emotional response in between. So I saw a sentence very similar to this. It was a profile of a fairly famous actor and describing how this person has taken on very dramatic roles, comedic roles, and then noting kind of all these other feelings or emotions that might come from an audience watching her performance. So that might be one of those started in the past, continues into the present. This is someone who is continuing to act and perform in the present time. Now let's take a look at making a negative sentence in the present perfect. Again, pay attention to that subject. Okay? If your subject is I, you, we, or they, use have not and then the participle form. But if your subject is he, she, or it, you're going to use has not and then the participle form of the verb. You might also encounter the contractions haven't and hasn't. In fact, I've used one in my example here. His statistics haven't evoked the dominant player fans have come to expect. This sentence is kind of subtly criticizing a particular athlete. Right? There were sort of high expectations based on his past performance, and in the present season, the way he's performing is not really making people remember how strong and dominant he had been in the past. Now let's move on and make a question, a yes or no question in the present perfect. To do this, you'll start with have or has, then you'll have your subject. We want our have or has to match the form of the subject. Then you'll use the participle form of the verb. Here's the last example. Has the outbreak evoked memories of the pandemic? So here, maybe we're talking about some kind of illness that is spreading rapidly in a community, making people recall to mind what the early days of the pandemic felt like. Now let's move on to the simple future. Today we're going to focus on making sentences using will. Will is most common as people make predictions, sort of guesses about what things they think will happen in the future. But we also use it as people make promises and offers for the future. And you will see it as people use it to discuss their plans. A little less common, but the nice thing about making sentences with will is that our pattern's going to stay the same no matter what our subject is. In the affirmative, you'll see the subject, you'll see will, and then the base verb. So no special endings on the verb here. Let's take a look at an example. This air show will evoke the spirit of wartime bomber command airfield. So this sentence I borrowed from kind of an advertisement or press release talking about a particular air show that was going to feature a lot of World War II aircraft. And again, so all of these items are going to make people think back to that particular time. Now, if you want to make a negative simple future sentence, again, start with your subject, use will not, and then your base verb. Will not can be combined into the contraction won't. W-O-N apostrophe T, long O as we say it. An example of this might be, that dish won't evoke echoes of the chef's southern hometown, but it is nonetheless delicious. So I borrowed this sentence from a restaurant review. So it's describing a particular chef who grew up in a southern U.S. state and saying many of the items served here are not going to make you think of sort of typical southern dishes. But again, this person is still praising them. They're still delicious food, but it's not going to make you think of traditional southern food. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple future. To do this, start with will. Then you'll have the subject, right? And then our base verb. Here's my last example. Will this evoke a response from them? So, right, this is our subject. It's not really specific. Maybe it's an email. Maybe it's some kind of warning, some type of other communication, right? And we want to know if it's going to produce some kind of response. Finally, let's take a look at some words that are related to our verb evoke. The noun form of this word has this tion suffix, and we're going to pronounce this word evocation. It looks and maybe sounds a little different, so I'll say it again, evocation. Many dictionaries also include a second pronunciation, so making the schwa sound as our second vowel sound, so you might hear evocation. But I think people will understand you no matter which form you use. Just like our verb, this noun has several different meanings. We're going to talk about two of them here. So the first way you'll hear it used is to talk about the act of bringing or recalling a feeling, memory, or image to the conscious mind. So an example of this might be, this work is a vivid evocation of the daily life of laborers in the late 1800s. So here, right, it's really trying to strongly describe that you are going to be thinking about about really understanding what it would have been like to have a really physical job at this point in time. And I think actually I'm realizing I have three meanings here for the noun. So pardon for my error a moment ago. But our second way to use that noun, evocation, is to talk about some type of account or work of art that brings or recalls some type of feeling, memory, or image to one's mind. An example of this: her stories have poetic evocations and allusions to tragedy. So you can see kind of strong feelings and memories here in this particular person's writing or piece of art. And then the third way we might encounter this noun means the action of eliciting a response. An example of this in a sentence might be: the evocation of laughter from the audience shocked the presenters. So this is their response. That's what's being discussed there. The next word we'll talk about is the adjective form of this word, evocative. This means evoking or tending to evoke an especially emotional response. An example of this: Chalamet radiates charisma in the evocative Bob Dylan biopic. So this sentence, again, is something I borrowed from real, authentic use of the word. It was in a movie review about the singer-songwriter Bob Dylan. There's a particular actor, Timothy Chalamet, who's playing this particular role, and the person describing it says, describing this movie as being really strong in producing an emotional response from the audience. Our last word to discuss today is the adverb evocatively. So now we're describing something done in a way that makes you remember or imagine something, and generally this has kind of a pleasant or positive meaning to it. An example of this: Homer's epic Iliad has been evocatively reimagined in the school's latest production. Again, this sounds like another review of a piece of theater, and right, this person, I would say, has a rather pleasant reaction. It's maybe based on, or it's going to use elements of this particular story, Iliad, and right, largely, again, positive feelings as you sort of think back or remember the elements that are similar. Thanks to everyone for watching today's video, and a special thanks to the viewer Ressa for suggesting today's verb. I hope you all have a great day.